I sat alone in my barracks room, staring at my laptop screen as if it might suddenly offer different numbers if I looked hard enough. The military-issued furniture felt cold and impersonal around me, just like the decision I was about to make. My finger hovered over the mouse, trembling slightly as I read the balance once more. College fund, 43,856.79. 4 years of deployment bonuses, hazard pay from my tour in Afghanistan, and every spare dollar I'd managed to save while wearing. The uniform. One click and it would all disappear. My phone buzzed again, the 5th time in the last hour. Another text from Mom. "Jess, please, we're desperate. The bank called again today." I closed my eyes, the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. 3 months from now, I was scheduled to leave the Army after 6 years of service. My college fund was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to finally use my GI Bill alongside my savings to attend nursing school. A future that was mine, earned through sandstorms, gunfire, and the constant, grinding stress of military life. Now that future was balanced on a knife's edge because of a series of increasingly desperate calls from home. Dad had lost his contracting business during the economic downturn. Mom had maxed out their credit cards trying to keep them afloat. My younger brother Tyler had dropped out of community college and moved back home, bringing his own mountain of debt with him. And somehow, through some twisted family logic, their solution had landed squarely on my shoulders. "You've got all that deployment money just sitting there," Dad had said last week, his voice gruff with a pride that was cracking around the edges. "We wouldn't ask if we weren't about to lose everything, Jess." The worst part? I believed him. I believed they were desperate. I believed they had exhausted every other option before calling their daughter, who was thousands of miles away, serving her country. I believed this was a one-time emergency that would save my childhood home, the place that held every memory of who I was before dog tags and combat boots. I stood up and paced the small room, my footsteps soundless on the thin carpet. Habit from too many night patrols. 6 years in uniform had trained me to act decisively under pressure, to put the mission and my team above myself. But what about my mission now? What about the future I had carefully planned during midnight watches and between convoy runs? Phone buzzed again. This time it was Tyler. "Dad's talking about bankruptcy. Mom won't stop crying. Please, sis." I felt my resolve crumbling. Family was family. We took care of our own. Wasn't that what I'd been doing since I enlisted at 18, sending home money whenever I could? Wasn't that why I volunteered for the dangerous assignments with better pay? Before I could second-guess myself, I sat back down at my laptop and clicked transfer funds. The screen blinked, asking if I was sure I wanted to transfer $38,000 to an external account. Nearly everything I had, except for a small emergency buffer. I clicked yes. There it was. Done. Years of sacrifice vanishing in seconds. I felt strangely hollow as I typed out a text. "Money sent. Should be in your account by tomorrow. Love you guys." Mom responded instantly. "Thank you, Jess. You've saved us. We'll pay you back as soon as we can. Promise." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But as I closed my laptop and lay back on my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that I had just made a terrible mistake. The next morning, I woke to my alarm at 0500, my body automatically swinging into the routine that had governed my life since basic training. Physical training, shower, uniform, breakfast. I moved through it all with mechanical precision, my mind still wrestling with what I'd done the night before. I'd given up my future to save my family's past. Was it worth it? There was no way to. No yet. Staff Sergeant Miller noticed my distraction during morning formation. "Everything all right, Ramirez?" she asked as we broke ranks to head to our duty stations. "Fine, Sergeant," I replied automatically. 6 years had taught me to keep personal problems personal. The Army didn't care about your family drama, your heartbreak, your doubts. The mission came first, always. Bullshit, Miller said. But not unkindly. You look like someone shot your dog, but whatever it is, leave it outside when you come through those doors. We've got a supply inventory to finish before the new recruits arrive next week. Yes, Sergeant. I spent the day counting and recounting. Equipment, checking serial numbers against our database, my hands moving automatically while my mind kept calculating and recalculating. Without my savings, could I still afford an apartment when I got out? Would I need to delay school? Should I re-enlist for another tour to rebuild my fund? It was nearly 1800 hours when my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Dad. Money received. Thank you, soldier. Proud of you. Something about the message made my stomach clench. Not, I love you, or, we'll make this right. Just proud of you for fulfilling my duty. As if my life savings had been an expected deployment, not a massive personal sacrifice. I pushed the thought away as I finished my shift. Dad wasn't great with emotions, never had been. He'd grown up in the men don't cry generation and never quite broken free of it. His pride was his way of saying thanks. It had to be enough. 3 days passed before I heard from home again. I was in the middle of PT when my phone started buzzing repeatedly. I finished my set of push-ups before checking it. 5 missed calls from Mom. 1 text, call ASAP. My heart rate, already elevated from exercise, kicked into overdrive. Had something happened? Was someone hurt? I quickly toweled off and found a quiet corner of the gym. Mom? What's wrong? I asked as soon as she picked up. Jessica, she began, her voice tight and strange. Did you only send 38,000? I blinked, confused. Yes. Nearly everything I had saved. But your father told everyone you were sending your entire GI Bill. The loan officer was expecting closer to 70,000. My blood went cold. The GI Bill doesn't work like that, Mom. It's not cash. It pays tuition directly to the school. I can't transfer it to you. Well, the bank says what you sent isn't enough to stop the foreclosure. We need at least 20,000 more. I sat down heavily on a bench, my legs suddenly weak. I don't have 20,000 more, Mom. I sent you almost everything. What about your emergency fund? Your retirement account? My what? Mom, I'm 24. I don't have a retirement account. And I need the emergency fund for when I get out in 3 months. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, filled only with my mother's shaky breathing. So you're saying you won't help us anymore? She finally asked, her voice taking on the wounded tone I remembered from childhood arguments. The tone that always made me back down, apologize, give in. But this time, something inside me hardened. I'm saying I can't help you anymore. I've given you everything I can. Your brother was right, she said quietly. You've changed. The Army's made you cold. The unfairness of the accusation hit me like a physical blow. Cold? Mom, I just gave you my entire future. How is that cold? If you really cared about this family, you'd find a way. I closed my eyes, counted to 10 the way my first sergeant had taught us to do when confronted with an impossible situation in the field. I'll call you later, I said finally. I have to get back to work. I hung up before she could respond and sat there for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. My entire body felt numb, disconnected from reality. How had my enormous sacrifice become not enough in the span of 3 days? Ramirez! Staff Sergeant Miller's voice cut through my daze. Break's over. Back to work. I nodded, stood up on autopilot, and rejoined the group. Physical training continued, jumping jacks, squats, sprints, while my mind raced 1,000 miles away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation with my mother. Had I misunderstood something? Were things worse than they'd initially told me? Or had they always expected me to completely sacrifice my future for theirs? At 0200, I gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. I pulled up my bank account, staring at the pitiful remaining balance. Then I opened a new tab and went to my email, scrolling through until I found what I was looking for, the acceptance letter to the nursing program I'd applied to before all this began. I was supposed to start classes 4 months from now. I'd already put down a non-refundable deposit using an earlier portion of my savings. Another email caught my eye, from Master Sergeant Ortiz, my mentor since my first deployment. Just checking. In. You still on track for nursing school after separation? Let me know if you need any advice on the transition. Civilian life is an adjustment, but you've got what it takes. My throat tightened. Ortiz had been the one who convinced me I could be more than a career soldier. You've got healer hands, Ramirez, she'd told me after watching me help a local Afghan child who'd been caught in crossfire. The Army trained you to patch wounds under fire. Imagine what you could do with proper medical training. I closed the laptop without responding. What could I possibly say? Sorry, I gave all my money to my financially irresponsible family and now I can't afford school. The shame burned too hot for that kind of honesty. Morning came with brutal swiftness. I dressed and headed to the mess hall, where I ran into Specialist Chen, one of the few other women in my unit. You look like death warmed over, she said by way of greeting, sliding her tray next to mine. Trouble sleeping? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without everything spilling out. Chen didn't press. That was the thing about Army friendships. We all carried our burdens, and we all respected the weight. Instead, she talked about the new equipment we were expecting, the rumors about our next training rotation, the latest ridiculous demand from higher up. I was almost feeling normal by the time my phone buzzed again. Tyler. Dad's going ballistic. Says you've abandoned the family when we need you most. I set my fork down, my appetite vanishing. Chen noticed. Bad news? Family stuff? I said vaguely. Ah. She nodded knowingly. The civilian world doesn't stop spinning just because we're in uniform. Anything I can help with? I hesitated. I hadn't told anyone about what I'd done, partly from shame, partly from the ingrained military ethos of handling your own problems. But suddenly the weight felt too heavy to carry alone. I sent most of my savings home to help my parents avoid foreclosure, I said quietly. Now they're saying it's not enough. Chen whistled low. How much we talking? Almost 40,000. Her eyes widened. Jesus, Ramirez, that's your whole future fund. Yeah. And they want more? I nodded, staring at my cooling breakfast. Tell them to pound sand, Chen said matter-of-factly. You've done enough, if only it were that simple. They're family, I said, as if that explained everything. And in my world, it always had. Chen shook her head. Family doesn't bleed you dry, Ramirez. Not even mine, and my mother thinks guilt is a love language. She stood up, collecting her tray. Just remember, you can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm, even if they share your DNA. Her words stayed with me throughout the day, echoing in my mind as I went through the motions of my duties. Had I been setting myself on fire all these years? First enlisting to help support the family when Dad's business first started struggling. Then volunteering for hazardous duty assignments for the extra pay. Now this final sacrifice of my carefully built future. That evening, my phone rang again. Dad this time. I almost didn't answer, but 6 years of ingrained respect made me pick. Up on the third ring. Jessica, he said, his voice gruff. Your mother's upset. No hello. No how are you. Just straight to what I'd done wrong. Some things never changed. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied carefully. Don't get smart with me, young lady. We raised you better than to turn your back on family. I closed my eyes, counted to 3. Dad, I gave you almost everything I had saved. And it's not enough, he snapped. The bank needs more or we lose the house in 30 days. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since you refused to help." "I didn't refuse to help," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "I already helped. I can't give what I don't have." "Then, re-enlist," he said, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. "Sign up for another tour. Get a bonus." The casual way he suggested I commit another 4 to 6 years of my life, possibly in a war zone, just to solve his financial problems knocked the wind out of me. "Dad," I said slowly, "do you understand what you're asking me to do? To give up my plans, my future, risk my life? I understand that when this family needed you most, you chose yourself," he interrupted. "I understand that the daughter we raised would never have hesitated to help her parents, her brother. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Jessica. You think it was fair when I lost my business? When the economy tanked? When the bank started sending foreclosure notices?" His voice had taken on the righteous anger I remembered from childhood lectures. "We supported you your entire life. Now, it's your turn to support us." A cold clarity washed over me. This wasn't about one emergency. This wasn't going to end with the 40,000 I'd already sent. In my father's mind, my life and resources would always be an extension of his, available whenever he needed them. "I've been supporting this family since I was 18 years old," I said quietly. "I've sent home thousands while I lived in barracks and war zones. I just sent you my entire future. If that's not enough, nothing ever will be." "So that's it? You're choosing nursing school over your family's home?" "I'm choosing to believe that my life has value too, Dad. That my sacrifices matter." He was quiet. For so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, "Your brother was right. The army changed you. The Jessica we raised would never have been this selfish." The words hit like shrapnel, designed to cause maximum damage. And they did, but not in the way he intended. Instead of breaking me down, they clarified everything. "Maybe the Jessica you raised needed to change," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Maybe she needed to learn her worth." "If that's how you feel," he said coldly, "then don't bother calling again. As far as I'm concerned, you're not part of this family anymore." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, as his words echoed in my mind. Not part of this family anymore. Cut off. Excommunicated. For the crime of not setting myself on fire thoroughly enough. A strange calm settled over me as I set the phone down. This was far from the first time my father had deployed the ultimate weapon, conditional love. As a child, I'd done anything to get back in his good graces when he was angry, work harder, apologize. Even when I wasn't wrong. Be perfect, but I wasn't a child anymore. I'd led troops through firefights. I'd made life-or-death decisions under pressure. I'd built a strength my father couldn't begin to understand. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Way to go, Jess. Dad's saying you're dead to him. Mom won't stop crying. Hope you're happy with yourself." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't be weaponized and twisted. Instead, I opened my laptop and navigated to my email. I found Master Sergeant Ortiz's message and hit reply. "Still planning on nursing school. Need some advice on making it work with limited funds. Can we talk?" I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then closed the laptop and lay back on my bed. The weight on my chest hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted somehow. No longer crushing me, just there. A heaviness I would carry with me, but not one that would stop me from moving forward. Maybe that was the difference between a burden and a wound. One you learn to carry, the other you have to heal from. I wasn't sure yet which this was, or if it was both. But for the first time since I'd sent that money home, I felt like I could breathe. I understood now that I hadn't just given them my savings. I'd given them my power. And they had used it not as a lifeline but as a confirmation that my resources would always be available to them. Chen's words came back to me. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. As the night deepened around me, I made a quiet promise to myself. I had spent 6 years learning to protect others. Now it was time to learn to protect myself, even from the people who were supposed to love me most. The revelation didn't feel like freedom. Not yet. It felt like grief, like loss. But beneath the pain was something solid and real, the foundation of the person I was becoming. A person who recognized her own value. A person who understood that real love doesn't come with a price tag. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. I would have to figure out how to make nursing school work with what little I had left. I would have to learn to live with my father's rejection. I would have to redefine what family meant to me. But tonight, in the quiet of my barracks room, I allowed myself to mourn what I had lost while acknowledging what I had finally found. The courage to stand my ground. Morning came with brutal efficiency, the way it always did in the Army. My alarm blared at 500, and I moved through my routine like a machine. Physical training, shower, uniform, duty. The military had taught me that emotions were luxuries to be processed later, if at all. The why. Mission always came first. But my mission had changed overnight. I was no longer a dutiful daughter sending money home to keep everyone afloat. I was a soldier 3 months from discharge, with nothing but a few $1,000s between me and civilian life. And a family that had declared me dead to them. Ramirez, you're with me today, Staff Sergeant Miller announced during morning formation. Supply inventory needs to be verified before inspection. I nodded, grateful for the mind-numbing task ahead. Counting equipment, checking serial numbers, it was exactly the kind of mechanical work that would keep my thoughts from spiraling. We were halfway through inventorying a shipment of medical supplies when Miller paused, eyeing me carefully. You're quieter than usual, she observed. And that's saying something. I continued unpacking boxes of gauze, noting quantities on my clipboard. Just focused, Sergeant, Miller snorted. Focused, my ass. You've miscounted that box 3 times. I looked down at my clipboard, realizing she was right. The numbers were a blur of nonsense, tallies marked and remarked. Sorry, Sergeant. I'll start over. Miller set down her own clipboard with a sigh. Take 5, Ramirez. Get some air. I'm fine. That wasn't a suggestion, she said, her tone softening slightly. Something's eating at you, and I need your head in the game. 5 minutes outside. Go! I set down my clipboard and walked outside, the bright morning sun momentarily blinding me. The air was crisp with early spring, a welcome change from the sterile smell of the supply room. I leaned against the building, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Against my better judgment, I checked it. Text from my mother. Your father didn't mean what he said. He's just stressed about the house. Please call us. And there it was, the familiar pattern. Dad explodes. Mom smooths things over. I forgive and forget until the next explosion. It was a dance we'd been performing my entire life, its steps so ingrained I could follow them in my sleep. But this time, something had changed. I could see the pattern from the outside now, recognizing it for what it was. Manipulation dressed up as love. Abuse disguised as tough parenting. Financial exploitation hidden behind family duty. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I pulled up the email from Master Sergeant Ortiz. She had replied to my message from last night. Happy to help. I've got connections at the VA hospital near campus. They're always looking for part-time help with military experience. Let's talk after your shift. A small ember of hope kindled in my chest. Maybe there was still a path forward. Staff Sergeant Miller opened the door, poking her head out. Time's up, Ramirez. Back to work. I nodded, pocketing my phone and returning to the supply room with renewed focus. The routine of counting and documenting centered me, creating a temporary bubble where family drama couldn't penetrate. By lunchtime, I had regained my military composure. On the outside, at least. Inside, my thoughts continued to churn as I picked at my food in the mess hall. Mind if I join you? I looked up to find Master Sergeant Ortiz standing at my table, tray in hand. At 42, Ortiz carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen it all and survived. 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. She'd been the one to patch me up after my first firefight, steady hands applying pressure to my shoulder wound while bullets pinged off the Humvee around us. Of course not, Master Sergeant, I said, straightening slightly. She sat down across from me, her dark eyes assessing. Relax, Ramirez. This isn't official business. I forced myself to loosen my shoulders, though the habit of deference was hard to break. Ortiz had been a mentor, but she was still several ranks above me. Got your email, she said, taking a bite of her sandwich. Want to tell me what happened to your funds? Last we talked, you had it all planned out. I hesitated, shame burning, hot in my chest. How could I admit that I'd given away my future so easily? Ortiz waited patiently, neither pushing nor retreating. It was a technique I'd seen her use in tense situations, creating space for truth to emerge on its own. My parents were about to lose their house, I finally said, my voice low. Dad lost his business. They had nowhere else to turn, so you gave them your college fund. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. All of it? Most of it, I admitted. Almost 40,000. Ortiz whistled softly. That's a lot of sacrifice, Ramirez. It wasn't enough, I said, the words tasting bitter. They want more. Dad wants me to re-enlist. And that's not what you want. Again, not a question. No, I said firmly. I've done my time. I want to be a nurse, not a career soldier. Ortiz nodded, taking another bite of her sandwich. Your father was military? No. Construction contractor. He never understood why I enlisted in the first place. But he understands the bonuses well enough. I looked down at my tray, uncomfortable, with the accuracy of her assessment. Ramirez, Ortiz said, her voice gentler now. Jessica, look at me. I raised my eyes to meet hers. The hardest lesson I ever learned was that my family of origin wasn't my responsibility to fix, she said quietly. Not their finances, not their relationships, not their happiness. It took me 3 tours and 2 divorces to figure that out. I blinked, surprised by her candor. Ortiz rarely spoke about her personal life. How did you do it? I asked. Set boundaries? Badly, at first, she admitted with a rueful smile. Lots of yelling, lots of guilt, but eventually I realized that loving someone and enabling them are 2 very different things. They said I'm dead to them, I whispered, the words still raw. Because I wouldn't give more. Ortiz's expression hardened slightly. Then they never deserved what you already gave. A lump formed in my throat. I looked away, focusing on a spot on the wall to keep the tears at bay. I've seen a lot of soldiers struggle with this, Ortiz continued after a moment. The military attracts people who are caretakers, who put the mission above themselves. It's what makes us good at our jobs. But some families see that as an ATM, not a virtue. So what do I do now? I can't afford school without that money. Yes, you can, Ortiz said firmly. It'll be harder, require more work study, maybe some loans. But you already have the GI Bill, and like I said, I know people at the VA hospital. They pay decent wages for part-time work, especially to vets with medical training. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket, scribbled something down, and tore out the page. Call this number tomorrow. Ask for Dr. Patel. Tell her I sent you. I took the paper, looking at the name and number written in Ortiz's precise handwriting. Thank you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Don't thank me yet, she replied with a small smile. Thank me when you're wearing scrubs instead of camo. As Ortiz stood to leave, she paused, her expression serious. One more thing, Ramirez. The money you sent home? Consider it gone. If you ever see a penny of it again, treat it as a surprise bonus, not an expected repayment. Trust me on this." I nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom in her words. "Now finish your lunch," she said, back to her official tone. "Can't have my medics running on empty." After she left, I sat for a long moment, turning her advice over in my mind. Consider it gone. It was a brutal assessment, but also oddly freeing. If I accepted that the money wasn't coming back, I could stop waiting for it. Stop hoping for a miracle reconciliation where my parents would realize their mistake and make things right. I could move forward. My phone buzzed again as I was heading back to duty. 3 texts from my brother Tyler in rapid succession. Mom's crying again. Dad's talking about selling his tools. When are you going to stop being selfish and help? The familiar guilt twisted in my stomach, but this time I recognized it for what it was. A trained response, a button they knew exactly how to push. I'd spent my entire life rushing to fix their problems, soothe their feelings, empty my pockets when they demanded it. No more. I typed back a simple response. I already helped? I gave you my college fund. There's nothing left to give. Tyler's response was immediate. So get a loan or something. We're family. Family. The word that had once meant everything to me now felt like a chain around my neck. I turned off my phone without responding and slipped it back into my pocket. The rest of the day passed in a blur of duties and drills. By evening formation, I was physically exhausted but mentally clearer than I'd been in days. A plan was taking shape. Not an easy one, but a possible one. GI Bill for tuition, VA hospital work for living expenses, maybe a small student loan. To cover the gaps. It wasn't the smooth transition I'd originally planned, but it was doable. I'd survived worse odds in the field. Back in my barracks room, I finally turned my phone back on. 6 missed calls. 3 from Mom, 2 from Tyler, 1 from Dad. A dozen texts, each more desperate than the last. The bank called again. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Is this how you repay us for raising you? We're going to lose everything. And finally, from Dad. If you're not going to help, don't bother coming home when you discharge. You're no daughter of mine. The we. Words should have devastated me. A week ago they would have. But now they just confirmed what I already knew. Their love was conditional, based on what I could provide, not who I was. With steady hands, I deleted all the messages without responding. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the nursing program website. My acceptance was still valid, though I'd need to confirm my enrollment within the next 2 weeks. I clicked the link to finalize my registration, a strange calm settling over me as I completed the forms. This was my mission now. My future, the one I'd earned through blood and service. The next morning, I called Dr. Patel at the VA hospital before my shift began. "Master Sergeant Ortiz speaks highly of you," she said after I explained my situation. "We always need qualified personnel with military medical experience. When do you discharge?" 3 months, I replied. "Perfect timing. We'll have a new intake. Unit opening then. It's not full-time, 20 to 30 hours a week, but the pay is competitive, and it works well with a student schedule. Send me your resume and discharge papers when you have them." I thanked her and hung up, a weight lifting from my shoulders. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a start, a foundation to build on. 3 days passed without contact from my family. I focused on my duties, worked out my budget for civilian life, and started researching affordable apartments near campus. The silence from home was both a relief and a new kind of pain, confirmation that I had truly been cast out for failing to meet their demands. On the 4th day, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, suspecting it might be my father calling from a different phone. But military training had instilled in me the habit of answering unknown numbers. Emergencies didn't always come from saved contacts. Specialist Ramirez speaking, I answered formally. Jessica? A woman's voice, vaguely familiar but not immediately recognizable. Yes. Who's this? It's Aunt Sarah, your mom's sister. I tensed. Aunt Sarah had always been the family peacemaker, the one sent in to smooth ruffled feathers when conflicts arose. If she was calling, it meant my parents had escalated the situation to the extended family. Hi, Aunt Sarah, I said carefully. What can I do for you? I've been hearing some concerning things from your mother, she began, her voice gentle but probing. Something about you refusing to help with their financial troubles? I closed my eyes, counting to 5 before responding. Did she happen to mention that I already sent them nearly $40,000 from my college fund? A pause. No, she admitted. She just said you were being difficult about helping them save the house. Because I have nothing left to give, I said firmly. I emptied my savings for them, Aunt Sarah, and it wasn't enough. Now they want me to re-enlist or take out loans to give them more. Oh, Jessica, she sighed. That doesn't sound right. It's not right, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. But it's what happened. Your mother made it sound like you were abandoning them in their time of need. Of course she did, I said, a bitter laugh escaping. Because that's easier than admitting they already took everything I had and still want more. Aunt Sarah was quiet for a moment. I didn't know, she finally said. About the money you already sent. Did they tell you they've declared me dead to the family? I asked. That Dad says I'm no daughter of his because I won't get loans or re-enlist to solve their problems. Another long pause. No, she said softly. They didn't mention that part. I'm not surprised, I said. It doesn't fit the narrative of ungrateful daughter abandoning her struggling parents. Jessica, Aunt Sarah began, her voice taking on the reasoning tone I remembered from childhood family gatherings. I know you're upset, but family— Don't, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. Don't tell me that family is all we have or that blood is thicker than water or any of those sayings people use to excuse toxic behavior. I wasn't going to, she said, sounding slightly offended. I was going to say that family shouldn't treat each other this way, on either side. I deflated slightly, my defenses lowering. I'm sorry. I'm just tired of being the family ATM. I understand, she said. More than you might think. Your grandfather did the same to your mother when we were young. It's a pattern. A pattern I'm breaking, I said firmly. Good for you, Aunt Sarah replied, surprising me again. It took your mother much longer to figure it out, and honestly, I'm not sure she ever fully did. I hadn't expected support from anyone in the family. The revelation that Aunt Sarah understood left me momentarily speechless. I didn't call to pressure you, she continued into my silence. I called to check on you, and to tell you that whatever's happening between you and your parents, you still have family who cares about you. Tears burned behind my eyes. Thank you, I managed. That means more than you know. Your cousins ask about you, she said. Emma's getting married next year. She'd love for you to be there, regardless of what your parents think. I'd like that, I said, a small smile forming despite everything. Good. And Jessica? What you did, giving them that money, was incredibly generous. But don't let them make you feel guilty for not burning yourself to the ground to keep them warm. It was nearly the same metaphor Chen had used. Hearing it from a family member made it resonate even more deeply. I won't, I promised, my voice stronger. I'm done setting myself on fire. After Aunt Sarah hung up, I sat on my bed, processing the conversation. It hadn't changed my situation. My savings were still gone, my parents still angry, my future still uncertain. But knowing someone in the family understood my perspective, supported my boundaries, gave me a small but vital sense of validation. Maybe family wasn't lost to me entirely, just redefined, reshaped into something healthier, with room for boundaries and mutual respect. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a local one this time. "Hey, it's Chen. Miller gave me your number. A bunch of us are going to O'Malley's tonight to celebrate Johnson's promotion. Could use a friendly face if you're free." I smiled, feeling something tight in my chest loosen slightly. It wasn't just blood family that mattered. The bonds formed through shared experience, mutual respect, and genuine care could be just as strong, sometimes stronger. I texted back, "I'll be there." Setting my phone aside, I reached for my laptop again. Time to finalize my apartment search. To continue building the future I'd earned, with or without my parents' approval. The mission continued. Different, harder in some ways, but clearer now. I wasn't a dutiful daughter sacrificing everything for ungrateful parents anymore. I was Jessica Ramirez, soon-to-be veteran, future nurse, survivor. And I was reclaiming my life, one decision at a time. O'Malley's was packed with soldiers when I arrived. The bar just outside base had been serving military personnel for decades, its walls covered with unit patches, dog tags, and faded photographs of soldiers long since retired or gone. The familiar smell of beer, fried food, and too many bodies, in too small a space hit me as I pushed through the door. Chen spotted me first, waving from a corner booth where she sat with 4 other members of our unit. I made my way over, dodging elbows and back slaps from other soldiers enjoying their rare night off. "Ramirez, you made it," Chen said, sliding over to make room for me. "Thought you might back out." "Almost did," I admitted, settling in next to her. "Been a long week. Well, you're here now. First round's on Johnson since he's the one with the new stripes." She pushed a beer toward me that I hadn't ordered but was exactly what I would have chosen. Johnson, sporting his newly acquired staff sergeant insignia, raised his glass. "To surviving another day in this man's army," he toasted. "And woman's," Chen added pointedly. "And woman's," Johnson agreed with a good-natured eye roll. The group fell into easy conversation, complaining about officers, sharing rumors about upcoming deployments, debating which mess hall on base had the least terrible food. Normal soldier talk, a world away from foreclosures and family ultimatums. I let it wash over me, relaxing for the first time in days. "So, Rodriguez, one of our mechanics, asked during a lull, "What's your plan after discharge?" Still, doing the nursing thing? The question brought me back to reality. "That's the goal," I said, taking a sip of beer to hide my discomfort. "You'll be great at it," Chen said firmly. "After patching up Johnson's sorry ass in the field, civilian patients will be a cakewalk." "Hey," Johnson protested. "That wasn't my fault. How was I supposed to know that fence was electrified?" The table erupted in laughter, and I found myself joining in despite everything. These people knew me, the real me, not as a daughter whose value was measured in financial support, but as a soldier, a medic, a friend who had proven herself in ways that mattered. As the night wore on, I noticed Chen watching me carefully during quiet moments. Finally, when the others were engaged in a heated debate about sports, she leaned in. "How's the family situation?" she asked quietly. I shrugged, peeling the label from my beer bottle. Radio silence from my parents. My aunt called, though. Turns out not everyone thinks I should sacrifice my future for their poor financial decisions. Chen nodded approvingly. "Small victories. You talked to Ortiz about alternatives for school?" "Yeah. She hooked me up with someone at the VA hospital near campus. Part-time work while I study." "Smart," Chen said. "Always knew you'd land on your feet." "Still figuring that part out," I admitted. "But I'm not giving up on nursing school." Chen clinked her bottle against mine. "That's my battle buddy, resilient as hell." The simple vote of confidence meant more than she could know. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, letting myself enjoy this rare moment of normalcy. But old habits died hard, and I found myself pulling it out to check the screen. Tyler. My stomach tightened as I opened the message. Banks moving forward with foreclosure. Mom's having panic attacks. Dad says it's your fault. The warm bubble of camaraderie around me popped instantly, reality rushing back in. I must have visibly reacted because Chen glanced at my phone. Family again? I nodded, locking the screen without responding to Tyler's message. My brother, still trying to make me feel guilty. Want to leave? I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. No, I'm not letting them ruin this too. Chen nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. I slipped my phone back into my pocket without responding to Tyler. Whatever crisis they were manufacturing tonight, it wasn't mine to solve. Not anymore. By the time I returned to the barracks that night, slightly buzzed and genuinely lighter than I'd felt in days, I had 3 more messages from Tyler, each more desperate than the last. Dad saying we might have to live in the car. This is really happening, Jess. Please just call. I sat on my bed, staring at the messages. The guilt was still there, but it felt different now, more distant, less all-consuming. I knew what they were doing. Not necessarily consciously, but the pattern was clear. Escalate the crisis, increase the emotional manipulation, force me back into the role of family savior. But I wasn't that person anymore. I typed a single response. I'm sorry you're going through this, but I've already given everything I can. I suggest looking into bankruptcy protection or mortgage assistance programs. Then I turned off my phone, set my alarm, and went to sleep. The next morning brought a new development. As I was getting dressed for PT, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender wasn't anyone in my family, but a name I hadn't seen in years, Angela Reyes, my childhood best friend who had drifted away when I enlisted. The subject line sent a chill down my spine. Your parents are asking everyone for money. I opened it with growing dread. Jessica, I hope this isn't overstepping, but I thought you should know. Your parents have been contacting people from church, old neighbors, even high school friends, asking for loans to save their house. They're telling everyone that you abandoned them in their time of need. I know we haven't talked in years, but that didn't sound like the Jess I knew. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Angela. I sat down heavily on my bed, the email still open on my phone. They were turning our entire hometown against me, creating a narrative where I was the villain who had left them to suffer while I selfishly pursued my own interests. The anger that rose in me was sudden and fierce, different from the hurt and betrayal I'd felt before. This was active character assassination. A deliberate attempt to isolate me from my support network back home. I forwarded the email to my personal account, then deleted it from my phone. I'd deal with it later. Right now, I had formation in 15 minutes. PT was a welcome distraction, the physical exertion burning away some of the anger that had built overnight, running until my lungs burned, pushing through sets of push-ups and sit-ups until my muscles screamed. It created a temporary space where nothing existed but the next breath, the next movement. Afterward, as we were cooling down, Staff Sergeant Miller approached. Ramirez, you're with Captain Rivera today. Medical supply audit. I nodded, grateful for the assignment. Captain Rivera was our medical officer, a no-nonsense woman who cared more about accuracy than conversation. Exactly what I needed today. The audit kept me busy until late afternoon, checking expiration dates on medications, verifying equipment counts, updating inventory logs. It was tedious work that required just enough focus to keep my mind from wandering to family drama. I was almost finished when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from an unknown number with my hometown area code. I declined it, only for it to ring again immediately. Whoever it was, they were persistent. Sighing, I stepped out of the supply room to answer. Specialist Ramirez speaking. Jessica. A man's voice, familiar but not immediately identifiable. It's Pastor Michaels. My stomach dropped. Pastor Michaels had been our family's minister since I was a child. A kind man who had officiated weddings and funerals, counseled troubled marriages, and led countless Sunday services. If he was calling, it meant my parents had escalated to the church community. "Pastor," I said carefully, "this is a surprise." "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," he said. "I'm calling about your parents." I assumed as much. A brief pause, as if my bluntness had caught him off guard. "They're in quite a difficult situation, Jessica. They came to me for counsel about the foreclosure." "Did they happen to mention that I already gave them $40,000 to help?" I asked, the edge in my voice sharper than I intended. Another pause. "They mentioned you had helped, yes, but they said you were now refusing to offer additional assistance. Because I have nothing left to give, Pastor. I emptied my college fund for them. Now they want me to take out loans or re-enlist for a bonus. They've declared me dead to them because I said no." "I see," he said slowly. "That adds considerable context to the situation. I imagine there's a lot of context they've left out." "Of their version," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Jessica," Pastor Michaels said gently, "I've known you since you were a little girl. You've always been responsible, thoughtful. It's why I was surprised when your parents suggested you had abandoned them out of selfishness." "It's interesting what people consider abandonment," I replied. "Is it abandonment to give someone every dollar you've saved for your future? Or is it abandonment to disown your daughter when she has nothing left to give?" "A fair question," he acknowledged. "One I'd like to discuss with all of you together, if possible." I laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Pastor, with all due respect, I'm on active duty. I can't just leave base for a family therapy session, especially with people who have made it clear they only value me for financial support." "I understand," he said, though I wasn't sure he did. "But reconciliation is always worth pursuing. The Bible teaches us—" "Pastor," I interrupted, "I appreciate your concern." "I do. But this isn't a simple misunderstanding that Scripture can smooth over. This is a pattern of financial and emotional abuse that's gone on for years. I've finally set a boundary, and they've responded by turning the whole town against me." "I wouldn't say the whole town," he began. "They've contacted friends I haven't spoken to since high school," I said flatly. "They're telling everyone I abandoned them when they needed me most, conveniently leaving out the $40,000 I already gave them." Pastor Michaels was silent for a moment. "I didn't know the extent of it," he finally admitted. "Your parents presented a very different picture." "I'm sure they did." "What can I do to help?" he asked, surprising me. I hesitated. I hadn't expected the conversation to turn this way. "Just tell people the truth if they ask. That I did help, substantially, but couldn't financially ruin myself to fix problems my parents created." "I can do that," he said. "And Jessica, I'm proud of the woman you've become. Setting healthy boundaries isn't abandonment. It's actually biblical, though many churches fail to teach that part." The unexpected validation from a figure from my childhood brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you, Pastor." After we hung up, I leaned against the wall outside the supply room, processing the conversation. It hadn't gone the way I expected. Instead of pressure to reconcile at any cost, he had offered understanding. Validation, even. Maybe the narrative my parents were creating wasn't as convincing as they hoped. I returned to the supply room to finish the audit, my mind clearer. Later that evening, after dinner in the mess hall, I returned to my barracks room to find an email waiting from Dr. Patel at the VA hospital. She had reviewed my service record and confirmed that a position would be waiting for me after discharge. The pay wasn't huge, but combined with my GI Bill benefits, it would be enough to live on while I completed nursing school. The relief was immense. This was happening. I was rebuilding my future brick by brick. My phone buzzed with a text from Chen. "Command post says there's mail for you." "Probably those nursing textbooks you ordered." I texted back a quick thanks and headed to the command post to collect my package. The soldier on duty handed me not the textbooks I was expecting, but a small envelope with my aunt's handwriting on the front. Curious, I opened it as I walked back to the barracks. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a short note. "Jessica, I know this doesn't replace what you've lost, but consider it an investment in your future. No strings attached. No need to tell your parents. Love, Aunt Sarah." I stopped in my tracks, staring at the check. It wasn't anywhere near what I'd given my parents, but it was enough to cover the security deposit and first month's rent on an apartment near campus. Enough to bridge the gap between discharge and my first paycheck from the VA. Tears welled up unexpectedly, not just for the financial help, but for the simple acknowledgement that my future mattered. That someone in my family saw me as more than a resource to be drained. Back in my room, I carefully put the check in my lockbox and sat at my desk to write a thank you email to Aunt Sarah. As I typed, I realized something had shifted in me. The constant knot of anxiety and guilt that had lived in my chest since that first desperate call from home had loosened. Not disappeared entirely, but changed from a suffocating presence to a manageable ache. I was going to be okay. The realization came with a sense of calm certainty. I had a plan. I had support, maybe not from my parents, but from people who actually respected my boundaries. I had skills and determination, and 6 years of proving I could survive difficult situations. My phone rang, the screen lighting up with my father's name. In the past, I would have answered immediately, heart racing with anticipation of his anger or demands. But now, I simply observed the screen until the call went to voicemail. Whatever crisis he was calling about, it could wait until I was ready to engage, if I chose to engage at all. Instead of checking the voicemail, I pulled up the nursing program website and began reading about the courses I would be taking in the fall: anatomy and physiology, pharmacology, clinical rotations. A future that was mine, hard-earned and reclaimed from the ashes of family obligation. A text came through from my father. "Call me immediately. This is your last chance to fix this." The threat was so transparent, so predictable, that it almost made me laugh. My last chance to fix what? Their financial irresponsibility? Their emotional manipulation? Their conditional love? I typed back a response, then deleted it without sending. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been said. No explanation that would penetrate the narrative they had constructed, where I was the villain and they were the victims. Instead, I turned my phone to silent and returned to my course reading. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, I was choosing peace, choosing myself. The following week passed in a blur of duties and preparations. I submitted my final discharge paperwork, confirmed my enrollment in the nursing program, and began seriously researching apartments near campus. Each step forward took me further from the toxic dynamic I had escaped, building momentum toward a future of my own design. My family continued their campaign of emotional manipulation, texts from Tyler about their impending homelessness, voicemails from Mom describing panic attacks, emails from Dad alternating between anger and guilt, inducing reminiscences about how much they had sacrificed for me growing up. I read or listened to them all, no longer avoiding the messages out of fear. But I responded selectively and only with facts. No emotional engagement, no defenses, no justifications. I've already given what I can. I suggest speaking to a financial advisor. I'm not in a position to provide additional funds. The emotional toll lessened with each exchange. Not because I cared less, but because I recognized the patterns more clearly. The catastrophizing, the victim language, the selective memory that forgot my years of financial support while magnifying their parental sacrifices. Chen and I were grabbing coffee off base when she asked the question I'd been asking myself. "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" I considered it carefully, watching steam rise from my cup. "I don't know," I admitted. "Not if reconciliation means returning to the old pattern. Not if it means being valued only for what I can provide. But if they recognized the problem, made amends?" I shrugged. "Maybe, eventually, but I'm not holding my breath." Chen nodded, understanding. "Family's complicated. My mom still thinks my joining the army was a personal betrayal of her dreams. For me, took 3 years before she'd even look at photos of me in uniform. How'd you handle it?" I asked. "Waited her out," Chen said simply. "Kept living my life. Let her come to terms with the fact that I was happier in the army than I would have been following her plan. Eventually, she realized that loving me meant accepting my choices, even if they weren't what she wanted." "Sounds healthy," I observed. "Now, sure, but it was hell getting there," she admitted. "Lots of tears, lots of fights. Worth it, though." I thought about Chen's experience as we walked back to base. The difference, I realized, was that her mother had eventually prioritized their relationship over her own expectations. She had chosen love over control. I wasn't convinced my parents were capable of that shift. Their behavior since I'd set boundaries suggested they valued submission more than relationship, financial support more than my well-being. But for the first time, I understood that their capacity for change wasn't my responsibility. I couldn't make them see me as a person rather than a resource. I couldn't make them respect my boundaries. I couldn't make them choose love over control. All I could do was keep moving forward, building a life that honored my own worth, whether they ever recognized it or not. 2 weeks before my discharge date, I received a letter from the foreclosure, attorneys handling my parents' case. Not an email or a phone call, an actual physical letter, addressed to me at the base, typed on heavy letterhead that spoke of authority and consequences. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, half expecting legal threats or demands for payment. Instead, I found something more surreal. "Dear Ms. Ramirez," it began formally, "this office represents Coastal Federal Bank in the foreclosure proceedings against Frank and Diane Ramirez. It has come to our attention that you may have provided substantial financial assistance to the defendants in this matter. We are inquiring whether you intend to continue acting as a financial guarantor for these individuals, as they have repeatedly referenced your military status and financial support in their communications with our office." I read the letter twice, my initial anxiety transforming into a cold, clear anger. My parents had been using my name and military service to stall the foreclosure, implying to the bank that I would be covering their debts. They had turned me into a bargaining chip without my knowledge or consent. I sat at my desk and composed a response immediately, my words precise and formal. "To whom it may concern. I am writing to clarify that while I did provide a one-time financial gift to Frank and Diane Ramirez, I am not and have never agreed to act as a financial guarantor for their mortgage or any other debts. I have no intention or ability to provide additional funds. Please remove my name from your records regarding this matter. I am not a party to their financial agreements and have not consented to be referenced in these proceedings." I signed it with my full name and rank, made a copy for my records, and took it to the base post office that afternoon. As I watched the clerk stamp and process the letter, I felt a strange combination of sadness and liberation. It was one more severed tie, one more boundary erected between my future and my family's chaos. But it was also confirmation of how they saw me, not as a daughter to be proud of, but as leverage to be used, a resource to be exploited. The revelation shouldn't have hurt after everything else, but it did. a fresh cut over old wounds. When I returned to my barracks, I found Chen waiting outside my door. "There you are," she said, straightening from where she'd been leaning against the wall. "I've been looking all over for you. What's up?" "We're throwing you a going-away thing next weekend. Nothing fancy, just drinks at O'Malley's. Johnson's handling the details, which means it'll be a mess, but a well-intentioned one." I blinked, surprised. "You don't have to do that." Chen rolled her eyes. "Of course we don't have to. We want to. 6 years of service deserves at least a few rounds of drinks and some embarrassing speeches." The simple acknowledgement of my time in uniform hit harder than expected. My family had never fully supported my decision to enlist, viewing it as either a personal rejection of their plans for me or later as a convenient source of income. But here was Chen, and apparently the rest of the unit, ready to celebrate my service, to mark the milestone with genuine recognition. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "Say you'll be there," Chen replied. "And that you won't cry when Miller inevitably gets drunk and tells everyone about the time you had to give Johnson an IV in the field and couldn't find a vein for 20 minutes. I laughed despite myself. "That was not my fault. He was dehydrated." "Tell it to Miller," Chen said with a grin. "Anyway, Saturday at 8. Don't be late." After she left, I sat on my bed, the foreclosure letter still folded in my pocket, Chen's invitation lingering in my mind. 2 very different messages, representing the diverging paths of my life. Behind me, a family that valued me only for what I could provide. Ahead, colleagues who had become friends, who saw me as more than a walking ATM. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. That night, I drafted an email to my parents, the first time I had initiated contact since the rift began. I kept it brief and factual. "I received a letter from your foreclosure attorneys today. They seem to believe I am acting as your financial guarantor. I have responded to clarify that I am not. Please do not use my name or military status in your dealings with the bank or their representatives. This crosses a line that I cannot accept." I didn't mention the going-away celebration or my discharge date. I didn't ask about their situation or offer empty hopes for reconciliation. I simply established the boundary and left it at that. My father's response came the next morning, a single line. "So you're talking to lawyers now instead of family? Real nice, Jessica." The deflection and manipulation were so predictable I almost felt sorry for him. He hadn't denied using my name without permission, hadn't acknowledged the violation of trust, had immediately jumped to portraying himself as the victim of my reasonable boundary. I didn't respond. There was no point. The final days before discharge passed in a blur of out-processing appointments, paperwork, and equipment turn-ins. Each completed form brought me closer to civilian life, to a future of my own making. I'd secured a small apartment near campus, nothing fancy, but clean and affordable with the help of Aunt Sarah's gift. Dr. Patel at the VA hospital had confirmed my start date 2 weeks after discharge to give me time to settle in. Pieces were falling into place, one by one. The going-away gathering at O'Malley's turned out to be larger than Chen had implied. Not just my immediate unit, but soldiers from across the base showed up. People I'd treated in the medical center, officers I'd supported on field exercises, even the perpetually grumpy mess sergeant who had never seemed to notice my existence. "Before? Told you it would be a mess," Chen said as we surveyed the crowded bar. "Johnson has no concept of small gathering." "It's perfect," I said, meaning it. The night unfolded with toasts, war stories, and the particular brand of affectionate insults that constituted military camaraderie. Miller did indeed tell the IV story, embellishing it to make Johnson sound even more pathetic, and me even more flustered than we had actually been. Captain Rivera surprised everyone by showing up for an hour, raising a glass to one of the most competent medics I've had the privilege to command. As the night wore on, Ortiz appeared, settling into the chair across from me as others mingled around the bar. "Thought I'd find you here?" she said, setting a small box on the table between us. "Brought you something." "You didn't have to." "Just open it, Ramirez," she interrupted, a hint of her familiar command voice coming through. I opened the box to find a stethoscope, not the standard military issue we used on base, but a high-quality Littman with my name engraved on the bell. "Every nurse needs a good stethoscope," Ortiz said simply. "Figure this gives you one less thing to worry about." I ran my finger over the engraving. J. Ramirez, RN. The letters accounting for a title I hadn't yet earned but would. "This is—" I struggled to find words adequate to the moment. "Thank you, Master Sergeant." "Maria," she corrected. "You're almost a civilian now, and you're welcome." She paused, studying me with the assessing gaze I remembered from countless field exercises. "You ready for what's next?" "I think so," I said. "Still figuring some things out, but the big pieces are in place." She nodded. "Family situation any better?" "No," I admitted. "Maybe worse. They tried to use my name with their foreclosure attorneys, implying I'd keep bailing them out. I shut that down." "Good," Maria said firmly. "Boundaries aren't just about saying no, they're about enforcing consequences when people cross your lines." "I'm learning that," I said. "The hard way." "Only way anyone learns it," she replied with a hint of a smile. "Took me 2 failed marriages and 3 combat tours. You're ahead of the curve." The music changed, someone having commandeered the jukebox to play the unofficial anthem of our unit. Chen appeared at my elbow, tugging me toward the impromptu dance floor forming near the bar. "No deep conversations allowed," she declared. "This is a party, not a therapy session." Ortiz waved me away with a laugh. "Go. Be young. God knows you've earned it." The rest of the night passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and the bittersweet recognition that these people, this makeshift family forged in training and deployment, would soon be part of my past. We exchanged personal email addresses, made hollow promises to stay in touch that we all knew would be difficult to keep once civilian life and geography separated us. By the time the bar closed, my voice was hoarse from shouting over music, my feet sore from dancing, and my heart full. In a way it hadn't been in months. Whatever came next, I had this moment, this recognition that my service had mattered, that I had mattered, to carry with me. The next morning, moving through my barracks room with a mild hangover and a sense of impending finality, I found my phone lit up with notifications. 3 missed calls from my mother, a text from Tyler, and an email from Aunt Sarah. I checked Aunt Sarah's message first. "Jessica, I wanted to give you a heads up. Your parents' house is officially in foreclosure. The bank has set an eviction date for next month. They're telling everyone who will listen that this is happening because you abandoned them. I've been trying to correct the narrative when I can, but thought you should know what's being said. Don't let it derail you. Focus on your future. Love, Aunt Sarah." I sat heavily on my bed, the message settling like a stone in my stomach. Not because I felt responsible, that burden had lifted weeks ago, but because of the predictable, painful evidence that my parents still refused to take ownership of their choices. They were still casting me as the villain in their story, the ungrateful daughter who had left them to suffer. Tyler's text confirmed it. "Hope you're happy now. We're officially losing the house because you won't help." And my mother's voicemails, each more tearful than the last, reiterating the familiar theme. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you? Is this the kind of daughter we raised?" I deleted the voicemails without finishing them, closed the email without responding, let Tyler's text sit unanswered. Their narrative wasn't mine to fix. Their crisis wasn't mine to solve. Instead, I returned to packing my belongings, 6 years of military life condensed into 3 duffel bags and a footlocker. Uniforms I would no longer need. Books that had kept me company during long deployments. the small mementos of a life dedicated to service. My final day on base was surreal. The discharge ceremony was brief but meaningful, a formal acknowledgement of service completed honorably. Staff Sergeant Miller shook my hand with uncharacteristic sincerity. Captain Rivera presented me with my discharge papers and thanked me for my dedication. Chen hugged me fiercely, extracting promises to text when I reached my new apartment. And then it was done. 6 years of service completed. Dog tags exchanged for a veteran's ID card. The uniform I had worn with pride replaced by civilian clothes. That still felt strange against my skin. I loaded my belongings into my car, a used Honda I'd purchased with part of my combat pay years earlier, and prepared for the 5-hour drive to my new home. As I pulled away from the base that had been my world for so long, I felt a complicated mixture of grief, anxiety, and hope. One chapter ending. Another beginning. The apartment was exactly as I remembered from the virtual tour. Small but functional, with a kitchenette, modest bedroom, and a living area just large enough for a couch and desk. The building housed several other students and young professionals, its location within walking distance of both the university and the VA hospital where I would be working. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Paid for with my own planning, Aunt Sarah's generosity, and a careful budget that accounted for my reduced circumstances. I spent the evening unpacking essentials and arranging furniture, finding comfort in the simple tasks of creating order. My phone remained quiet, no further messages from my family, as if they had finally accepted that I wouldn't be manipulated back into the role of financial savior. The silence was both a relief and a new kind of pain. Family estrangement, I was discovering, didn't happen in a single dramatic moment, despite my father's declaration that I was dead to them. It unfolded gradually, in the accumulation of unanswered messages, the acceptance of separation, the slow fading of what had once seemed unbreakable bonds. As night fell on my first day as a civilian, I sat on my new couch, a second-hand find from a local thrift store, and allowed myself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. The loss of my savings, the severing of family ties, the end of my military career, the uncertain beginning of civilian life. I cried then, not the desperate tears of someone drowning in circumstances beyond their control, but the cleansing tears of someone acknowledging loss while moving forward. Grief wasn't weakness. It was recognition of what had mattered, what had changed, what could not be recovered. When the tears subsided, I pulled out my laptop and opened the orientation materials for the nursing program. Class schedules, required textbooks, clinical rotation information. The concrete details of the future I had salvaged from the wreckage of family obligation. A text buzzed through from Chen. New place all set up? Civilian life treating you okay? So far? I smiled, typing back. Getting there. Feels weird not to have formation in the morning. You'll adjust. Might even learn to sleep past 0500. Revolutionary concept. Exactly. Take care, Ramirez. Text if you need anything. The simple exchange grounded me, a reminder that family wasn't defined by blood alone. The bonds forged through mutual respect and genuine care could be just as strong, sometimes stronger, than those of biological connection. The following days settled into a new routine. Orientation at the VA hospital, where Dr. Patel introduced me to colleagues and showed me around the facilities. Registration at the university, where I finalized my class schedule and purchased textbooks. Exploring my new neighborhood, finding the nearest grocery store, laundromat, coffee shop. Each small accomplishment felt significant, evidence that I was building something new, something that belonged solely to me. A week after my move, as I was returning from the campus bookstore with an armful of nursing texts, I found a package waiting outside my apartment door. No return address, just my name and new address written in familiar handwriting. My mother's. I carried it inside along with my books, setting it on the kitchen counter while I put away my purchases. For nearly an hour, I moved around the apartment, straightening, organizing, finding excuses not to open the mysterious package. Finally, curiosity overcame apprehension. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer and carefully slit the tape sealing the box. Inside, nestled in crumpled newspaper, was a framed photograph I remembered from my childhood bedroom. Me at age 8, dressed in a Halloween costume I had made myself, a homemade stethoscope around my neck, nurse, written in marker on a paper hat. Beneath it lay a folded piece of paper, my mother's flowing script covering both sides. "Jessica," the letter began, "I don't know if you'll even open this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, but I needed to send it anyway. Your Aunt Sarah came to see us yesterday. She told us about your new apartment, your nursing program. She also told us some hard truths about how we've treated you, things I should have seen for myself but didn't want to face. I remember when you wore this costume. You were so determined to be a nurse even then. You practiced taking pulses on all your stuffed animals. Your father and I should have been your biggest supporters in that dream. Instead, we became its biggest obstacle. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or reconciliation. I know those. Things must be earned, not demanded. I'm not even asking you to respond to this letter. I just wanted you to have this photograph as a reminder that some part of me, however flawed and buried, did see you, did know who you were meant to be. Your father isn't ready to acknowledge his part in what happened. He may never be. But I am beginning to understand with Sarah's help how deeply we failed you, not just in taking your college fund, but in making you responsible for our poor choices, in valuing what you could provide over who you are. We are losing the house. It's happened, and it was our fault, not yours. We found a small apartment. We can afford on your father's new job. Yes, he finally found work. Tyler has moved in with a friend and is talking about going back to school. I don't know if we'll ever repair what's been broken between us. Some damage can't be undone. But I wanted you to know that I am proud of you for standing your ground, for becoming the nurse you always wanted to be, despite our interference. Well, Jessica, you deserve every good thing that comes your way. Mom, I set the letter down, my vision blurring with tears. It wasn't an apology, not really. It didn't acknowledge the full extent of the harm they had caused or offer any concrete amends for the money they had taken. It certainly didn't promise repayment. But it was something I hadn't expected, a recognition, however limited, that I had been right to protect myself, that my dreams mattered, that the boundaries I had established were valid. I placed the framed photograph on my desk, next to my nursing textbooks and the stethoscope Ortiz had given me, a reminder of where I had started, how far I had come, and the obstacles I had overcome to get here. Then I pulled out my phone and typed a brief message to my mother. Thank you for the photograph. I received your letter. I'm not ready for more communication right now, but I appreciate the acknowledgement. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned back to unpacking my books. There was studying to be done, shifts to prepare for, a new life to build. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. My finances were still precarious, my relationship with my family still deeply damaged, my adjustment to civilian life still in its earliest stages. But for the first time in months, I felt a sense of possibility untainted by obligation. I had survived war zones. I had survived family betrayal. I would survive this transition too, emerging stronger, wiser, more aware of my own worth and the boundaries needed to protect it. The future, my future, was waiting. The first day of nursing. School arrived with a mixture of excitement and anxiety that reminded me of my first day of basic training 6 years earlier. Different context, same butterflies in my stomach, same determination to prove myself equal to the challenge. I woke before dawn. Old military habits died hard, and methodically prepared for the day. Shower, coffee, a simple breakfast, then the careful arrangement of notebooks, textbooks, and pens in my backpack. Small rituals to center myself before stepping into the unknown. The campus was just coming to life as I arrived, early morning sunlight warming the brick buildings, a few sleepy students making their way to 8 a.m. classes. I found my lecture hall easily, having memorized the campus map days before, another military habit that served me well in civilian life. I chose a seat in the second row, close enough to catch everything but not so close as to stand out. As other students filtered in, I observed them with the quiet watchfulness I'd developed during deployment. Most looked younger than me, fresh from high school or early undergrad programs, their faces unlined by the kind of experiences that had shaped mine. A few were older, perhaps changing careers or returning to education after a hiatus. The professor arrived precisely at 8, a brisk woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately reminded me of Captain Rivera. "Welcome to Foundations of Nursing Practice," she began without preamble. "I'm Dr. Winters. This course will either confirm your calling to nursing or send you running for a different major. Either outcome is acceptable to me." A nervous laugh rippled through the classroom. I felt a smile tugging at my lips despite my anxiety. Captain Rivera would have approved of her directness. "Nursing isn't just a job," Dr. Winters continued, pacing slowly at the front of the room. "It's not even just a profession. It's a commitment to being present for people at their most vulnerable moments. To make that commitment, you must first know yourself, your strengths, your limitations, your breaking points." Her gaze swept across the room, seeming to linger momentarily on each face. "Some of you already have life experiences that have taught you these things. Others will discover them during your clinical rotations. All of you will be tested, not just academically, but emotionally and ethically." I felt a quiet resonance with her words. I had been tested, not in hospital corridors, but in war zones, in family crises, in moments of decision that shaped the course of my life. Perhaps those experiences would serve me here as well. Dr. Winters launched into an overview of the syllabus, her expectations, and the structure of the program. I took careful notes, the familiar routine of information gathering steadying my nerves. This was a mission, like any other. Define objectives, identify resources, execute the plan. After class, as students filed out discussing study groups and textbook prices, Dr. Winters called out, "Ramirez, a moment?" Surprised to be singled out, I approached her desk. "Yes, Dr. Winters?" "Dr. Patel at the VA mentioned you'd be in my class," she said, organizing papers as she spoke. "Said you were transitioning from military service." "That's right," I confirmed. "Army medic, 6 years. She nodded, appraising me with sharp eyes. "Military students tend to do well in my courses. The discipline transfers. But they sometimes struggle with the transition from hierarchical decision-making to collaborative care." "I'll keep that in mind," I said, appreciating her directness. "Good. And Ramirez?" She paused, looking up from her papers. "My door is open if you need resources. The shift from military to civilian life can be challenging, especially while managing academic demands." The unexpected offer of support caught me off guard. "Thank you, Dr. Winters. I appreciate that." She nodded briskly, returning to her papers, clearly considering the conversation concluded. I gathered my things and headed to my next class, mulling over the interaction. It was strange to be seen not just as a student, but as a veteran, someone with a specific context and potential needs. Strange, but not unwelcome. The rest of the day passed in a blur of introductions, syllabi, and the gradual formation of a mental map connecting courses to clinical requirements to future career paths. By evening, as I walked back to my apartment, I felt both overwhelmed and strangely invigorated. This was happening. I was doing it. Despite everything that had tried to derail me, I was here, beginning the journey I had planned for so long. My phone buzzed as I unlocked my apartment door. A text from Chen. First day of school survived? Any mean girls I need to beat up for? You? I smiled, typing back. All good. Though there's a microbiology textbook that's intimidating me. Think you could take it? Absolutely. I've fought scarier things. Eating MREs for 6 months straight, for instance. The light-hearted exchange eased some of the day's tension. I set my backpack down and moved to the kitchen to prepare a simple dinner, my mind already organizing study schedules and assignment deadlines. The military had taught me to plan meticulously and execute efficiently, skills that would serve me well in the academic battlefield ahead. As I ate, I scrolled through my email, finding a message from Dr. Patel confirming my orientation for my part-time position at the VA hospital later that week. Another piece falling into place. I was about to close my laptop when a new email arrived. From Tyler. Subject line simply, update. My finger hovered over the delete button. I hadn't heard from my brother since his angry text about the foreclosure. Part of me wanted to maintain the silence, the careful distance I had established from my family's chaos. But curiosity won out, and I opened the message. Jess, it began. Don't know if you're reading these, but thought you should know we've moved out of the house. Bank took it officially last week. Dad found a construction job, and I'm back at community college part-time. Mom's been different since Aunt Sarah visited. Quieter, thinking a lot. She told me about sending you that picture and letter. Don't know if that meant anything to you. I was angry before. Said things I shouldn't have. It was easier to blame you than face that we did this to ourselves. Not asking for forgiveness or money. Just wanted you to know we're figuring our shit out finally. Hope nursing school is what you wanted it to be. Tyler. I read the email twice, uncertain how to feel. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was an acknowledgement of sorts, that I hadn't caused their problems, that the responsibility lay with them. Coming from Tyler, who had always followed Dad's lead in blaming me, it represented a significant shift. After consideration, I typed a brief reply. Tyler, thanks for the update. Glad to hear you're back in school. Nursing program is challenging but good. Take care of yourself. Jess. Not warm, not hostile, just neutral. An acknowledgement without an invitation for more. I wasn't ready to reopen those doors, wasn't sure I ever would be. But the simple exchange of information felt like a small step toward something. Not reconciliation exactly, but perhaps a gradual unwinding of the knot of anger and hurt that had bound us. The next few weeks established a rhythm to my new life. Mornings in classes, afternoons in the library or study groups, evenings preparing for the next day. My part-time orientation at the VA hospital began, introducing me to the systems and protocols I would navigate as a nursing assistant while completing my degree. Dr. Patel had placed me in a unit serving primarily older veterans, men and women, who had served in Vietnam, the Gulf War, even a few remaining Korean War veterans. The work was physically demanding but emotionally rewarding in ways my military service had rarely been. Instead of patching wounds under fire, I was helping veterans maintain dignity during recovery, listening to their stories, being present for their good days and bad. You've got a natural manner with them, my supervisor observed after my second week. They respond well to you. Shared language, I explained. They know I've served too. She nodded. It makes a difference, especially with the ones who don't trust civilians to understand. I hadn't expected how much comfort I would find in being around other veterans. Despite our different eras of service, different branches, different experiences, there was a shorthand between us, an unspoken understanding. Many of them called me Doc once they learned I'd been a medic, the familiar term of respect from my Army days that now bridged generations of service. One Friday evening, as I was helping an elderly Marine veteran with his evening medications, He fixed me with a piercing gaze. "You married, Doc?" he asked abruptly. "No, sir," I replied, used to the personal questions that often came from long-term patients. "Kids?" "No, sir." "Family close by?" I hesitated, the familiar ache resurfacing. "Not at the moment." He nodded sagely as if I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "Thought so. Got that look about you." "What look is that?" I asked, curious despite myself. "The one that says you've survived friendly fire," he said simply. "Not all wounds come from the enemy." The unexpected insight caught me off guard. "You could say that," I acknowledged quietly. He accepted his medication cup with gnarled fingers. "Family's complicated for a lot of us who served. Sometimes they don't understand what we've done, or why. Sometimes they only see what they can get from us." "You've experienced that?" I asked, momentarily setting aside the professional distance I usually maintained. "My first wife cleaned out our bank account while I was in Vietnam," he said matter-of-factly. "Second one stuck around until the nightmares got too bad. Third one's been with me 30 years now, but it took that long to find someone who saw me, not just the uniform or the problems." He swallowed his pills with practiced efficiency. "Point is, Doc, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who respect your boundaries, who see your worth beyond what you can do for them." The simple wisdom, delivered without judgment or expectation, settled deep in my chest. "Thank you for sharing that," I said sincerely. He waved away my thanks. "Just calling it like I see it. You'll find your people, Doc. Might already have, without realizing it." The conversation stayed with me throughout the evening and into the weekend as I balanced coursework with household chores and the occasional text exchanges with Chen or Ortiz. Family isn't always blood. The people who respect your boundaries, who see your worth beyond what you can do for them. I thought about Aunt Sarah's generous gift, Chen's unwavering support, Ortiz's practical mentorship, Dr. Patel's professional guidance, even Dr. Winter's straightforward offer of resources. None of them were blood relatives, yet each had demonstrated more genuine care for my well-being than my parents had in years. Perhaps family was something you built, not just something you were born into. The realization didn't erase the pain of what had happened, but it offered a different perspective, one that focused on what I had gained rather than what I had lost. Midterms arrived with the intensity I had expected, consuming every spare moment, with study sessions, practice assessments, and the meticulous review of lecture notes. I reduced my hours at the VA temporarily, grateful for Dr. Patel's understanding and Aunt Sarah's gift that provided a small financial buffer. I was leaving the library after a particularly grueling study session when my phone rang, my father's number. My heart rate spiked instantly, the familiar fight-or-flight response kicking in even after months of minimal contact. For a moment, I considered not answering. But curiosity and a strange sense of readiness propelled me to accept the call. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Jessica?" My father's voice, gruff as ever, but lacking the angry edge I had come to expect. "Got your number from Sarah. Hope that's all right." "It's fine," I said neutrally, waiting for him to reveal the purpose of the call. A beat of silence stretched between us, then, "How's the nursing program going?" The mundane question, so at odds with our last interactions, caught me off guard. "It's good, challenging but good. Your mother said you always wanted to be a nurse. Had that costume when you were a kid." "I remember," I said, thinking of the framed photograph now sitting on my desk. Another silence, this one longer. I could almost hear him struggling to find words. My father, who had always been so certain, so declarative in his communication. "Jessica, I'm not good at this," he finally said, "at admitting when I'm wrong. Your mother says I need to try anyway." I said nothing, giving him space to continue, unwilling to make this easier for him. What we did, what I did, taking your college money, then demanding more. It was wrong. The words seemed physically painful for him to produce. I told myself it was justified because we're family. Because parents sacrifice for kids, so kids should sacrifice for parents. But that's not how it's supposed to work. No, I agreed quietly. It's not. I can't pay you back, he continued. Not now, maybe not ever fully. The new job pays enough, for rent and basics, but not much more. I'm not asking for repayment, I said carefully. I know. That's part of what makes this harder. You're not even demanding what you deserve. He sighed heavily. Your Aunt Sarah's been talking sense into your mother and me, made us see things we didn't want to see. I leaned against a campus bench, processing his words. This wasn't the conversation I had expected, not an angry demand for help or a guilt trip about the foreclosure, but something approaching accountability. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. Don't deserve it yet. But I wanted you to know I see what I did wrong. See how I failed you. The simple acknowledgement hit harder than I had anticipated. For months, I had carried the weight of being cast as the villain in my family's narrative. Having my father, the primary author of that narrative, revise his perspective felt like a weight lifting. Not completely, but noticeably. Thank you for saying that, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Your mother wants to know if you'd be open to a call from her sometime. Not right away if you're not ready. Just sometime. I considered the request carefully. Maybe. Not right now, I'm in the middle of midterms, but maybe after. That's fair, he said, an acceptance that would have been unthinkable months ago. I'll let her know. The conversation concluded awkwardly, but without hostility, a first in recent memory. As I continued my walk home, I tried to process what had happened. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but perhaps the first tentative step toward a different kind of relationship. One built on honesty rather than exploitation, on recognition of past harm rather than perpetuation of unhealthy patterns. I wasn't ready to trust it fully. Words were easy. Consistent actions over time would be the true test. But something had shifted, if only slightly. That night, as I prepared for the next day's exam, I sent a brief text to Aunt Sarah. Dad called today, said you've been talking sense into them. Thank you for being in my corner. Her response came quickly. Always have been, always will be. How are you feeling about it? Cautious, I replied honestly. One phone call doesn't erase everything. Wise perspective, small steps, clear boundaries. Proud of you, Jess. The simple affirmation warmed me in a way my father's halting apology hadn't quite managed. This was the kind of family support I needed. Unconditional encouragement without expectations or manipulation. The following week, after successful completion of midterms, I resumed my regular schedule at the VA hospital. The elderly Marine veteran, Mr. Sullivan, greeted me with a knowing look as I checked his vitals. You look different, Doc, he observed. Less weight on your shoulders. I smiled slightly. Maybe a little. Good talk with someone? Something like that, I acknowledged. He nodded, satisfied. Told you you'd find your people. Still figuring that out, I said. But maybe getting closer. That's how it goes, he replied sagely. Life's not a straight march to the objective. More like patrol in unfamiliar territory. Gotta check your map, adjust your route, remember your training. The military metaphor resonated with me. Good advice, Mr. Sullivan. Call me Jack, he said. Think we've earned first-name basis by now, don't you? I smiled. I'm Jessica. Know that, Doc. It's on your name tag. He tapped his temple. Still got all my marbles, even if the packaging's wearing out. His humor and insight had become A bright spot in my shifts. Another unexpected connection in this new life I was building, piece by piece. Later that evening, as I reviewed patient charts before ending my shift, Dr. Patel stopped by the nurses' station. "Jessica, do you have a moment?" "Of course," I said, finishing my note before giving her my full attention. "I've been reviewing staff evaluations for the quarter," she said. "Your supervisors have nothing but praise for your work. The veterans respond well to you, and your clinical skills are solid." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the formal feedback. "We're planning to expand the post-surgical recovery unit next semester," she continued. "It would mean more hours and slightly higher pay for qualified assistants. I'd like to recommend you for a position there, if you're interested. The schedule would still accommodate your nursing program." The opportunity was unexpected but welcome. Evidence that my work was valued, that my military medical experience translated meaningfully to civilian healthcare. More hours meant more financial stability, reducing my reliance on my dwindling savings and the small student loan I had reluctantly taken. "I'd be very interested," I told her. "Thank you for considering me." "You've earned the recommendation," she said simply. "The military's loss is our gain." As I walked home that evening, the autumn air crisp around me, I reflected on how much had changed in a few short months. From the desperate night I had transferred my college fund to my parents, to the painful rejection when I refused to give more, to the slow, deliberate building of a new life on my own terms. The path hadn't been easy. The hurt hadn't fully healed. But I was standing on my own ground now, making choices that honored my worth rather than diminished it. My phone buzzed with an email notification. My midterm grades posted earlier than expected. I paused under a streetlight to check them, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation churning in my stomach. A row of A's and B's filled the screen, concrete evidence that I belonged in this program, that I could succeed despite the obstacles. Without thinking, I took a screenshot and sent it to Aunt Sarah with the caption, "Worth fighting for." Her response was immediate. "Never doubted it for a second. So proud of you." I continued home, a sense of quiet achievement settling around me like a comfortable blanket. The future I had defended so fiercely was taking shape, one test, one shift, one boundary at a time. There would be more challenges ahead, more difficult, conversations with my parents if I chose to have them, more demanding coursework, more financial juggling. But for now, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be, moving forward, clear-eyed and determined, no longer defined by what others demanded of me, but by what I knew I was worth. Spring semester brought new challenges and opportunities. The promised increase in hours at the VA hospital materialized, along with a modest raise that eased some of my financial pressure. My course load was heavier, focusing on clinical rotations that required longer hours and more intensive study. But the routine I had established, early mornings, focused study sessions, careful budgeting, served me well as I navigated the increasing demands. One chilly March afternoon, I was finishing a shift at the hospital when Dr. Patel approached. "Me at the nurses' station. Jessica, do you have a minute? There's someone I'd like you to meet." I nodded, curious, as she led me to her office where a woman in a crisp navy suit was waiting. Her posture and bearing immediately registered as military to my trained eye, though she wore no uniform. "This is Commander Watson," Dr. Patel said. "She oversees the Navy's nurse commissioning program at the University Medical Center across town." The woman extended her hand with a firm, professional grip. "Specialist Ramirez, Dr. Patel has told me about your background and performance here. It's nice to meet you, ma'am," I said, falling easily into military formality despite my civilian status. "The Navy has an initiative to recruit former military personnel into our nursing corps," Commander Watson explained, "particularly those with combat medical experience. Dr. Patel thought you might be interested." I glanced at Dr. Patel, who nodded encouragingly. "It's a commissioning program," she added. You'd complete your nursing degree with Navy funding, then serve as an officer for a commitment period afterward. The possibility hadn't occurred to me. After leaving the Army, I had imagined my military career was behind me, but the idea of returning to service in a different capacity, as a nurse, with officer rank and the financial stability that came with it, was unexpectedly appealing. I'd be interested in learning more, I said carefully. Commander Watson smiled. Excellent. I have an information packet for you, and we could set up a formal meeting next week to discuss specifics. The next selection board meets in 2 months, so there's time to prepare an application if you decide to pursue this opportunity. I left the meeting with a thick folder of information and a mind buzzing with new possibilities. The program would cover my remaining tuition and provide a stipend for living expenses during school. Upon graduation, I would commission as an ensign in the Navy Nurse Corps, with a commitment to serve for 4 years. It was a major decision, not to be taken lightly. Yet as I reviewed the materials that evening, a sense of rightness settled over me. The military had been more than a job for me. It had been a community, a purpose, a framework that valued clear communication, strong ethics, and service to others. Returning to that world, but with new skills and a higher rank, felt like building on my foundation rather than starting over. I texted Chen to share the unexpected development. Navy recruiter talked to you? She replied almost immediately. They approached me last semester too. Are you considering it? I asked. Already applied. Board interview next month. The revelation made me smile. Of course, Chen was a step ahead, as usual. You think I should go for it? Her response was characteristic in its directness. If it aligns with your goals, absolutely. Military nursing is structured, good benefits, clear promotion path. Plus, you already speak the language. She was right. I did speak the language. Both. The literal terminology and jargon of military life, and the deeper values that underpinned service. The discipline, the teamwork, the sense of purpose larger than oneself. But there was more to consider. Returning to military service would mean potential deployments, relocations, the structured hierarchy I had both valued and occasionally chafed under during my Army years. And it would mean making decisions about my tentative reconnection with my family. My mother and I had been speaking more regularly, brief, careful conversations focused primarily on my studies and her therapy progress. My father remained more distant, but respectfully so, occasional texts or brief calls that acknowledged my boundaries rather than challenging them. Tyler had returned to community college full-time, sending sporadic updates on his progress. These fragile new connections would be tested by distance and the demands of military life. Yet perhaps that wasn't entirely negative. Perhaps the structure and separation would help maintain the healthy boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. I slept on the decision, then called Commander Watson the next day to schedule a formal meeting. The application process was rigorous but familiar. Medical screenings, fitness assessments, interviews about my military experience and nursing education. My Army service record worked strongly in my favor, particularly my combat medical experience and honorable discharge. As the process advanced, I found myself sharing the news with a widening circle. Dr. Winters offered to write a recommendation letter highlighting my academic performance. Dr. Patel provided a glowing evaluation of my clinical skills. Even Jack Sullivan, my veteran patient who had become something of a mentor, offered gruff encouragement. "Navy, huh?" he said when I mentioned it during a blood pressure check. "Well, at least you'll have better food than you did in the Army." "That's a low bar to clear," I replied with a smile. "Truth," he agreed. "But seriously, Doc, you've got what it takes. The Navy would be lucky to have you." His confidence meant more than he knew. The hardest conversation was with my mother. We had progressed to weekly phone calls, each one slightly less awkward than the last. When I mentioned the Navy program, she was silent for a long moment. "That would mean moving away," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. Eventually, yes, I confirmed, though I'd finish my degree here first. Another pause. Is this what you want, truly? The question surprised me. It wasn't about her preferences or how my decision would affect her. It was centered on my desires, my goals. A small shift, but a meaningful one. I think it is, I said honestly. The structure, the purpose, the community, those things matter, to me. And the financial stability doesn't hurt. Then you should do it, she said, her voice firmer now. You've always known your own mind, Jessica. Even as a little girl. I should have respected that more. The acknowledgement, so simple yet so profound, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, I managed. That means a lot. Your father and I made so many mistakes, she continued softly. Pushed our financial burdens onto you. Tried to make you responsible for our poor choices. You deserved better from us. You're working on it now, I said, surprising myself with the generosity I felt. That counts for something. Not enough to undo the harm, she said realistically. But I hope someday we might have a relationship based on mutual respect instead of obligation. I hope that too. I realized I meant it. The anger that had burned so hot when they first declared me dead to them had cooled over time, not disappearing entirely, but transforming into something more nuanced, a determination to protect my boundaries while remaining open to genuine change. As the semester progressed, my application to the Navy program advanced to the final stages. Chen received her acceptance in April, celebrating with an uncharacteristic display of emotion that involved actual hugging. Officer Chen has a nice ring to it, she declared over celebratory drinks at O'Malley's. It does, I agreed, though I'm still waiting on my final decision. You'll get in, she said confidently. Your combat record alone puts you ahead of most applicants. Add your performance at the VA and your grades, and you're a shoo-in. I appreciated her confidence, but tried to maintain perspective. Military. Selections were never guaranteed, and I had learned the hard way not to count on anything until it was officially confirmed. The confirmation arrived on a rainy Tuesday in May, as I was preparing for final exams. An email from Commander Watson with the subject line, "Selection Results," appeared in my inbox. I took a deep breath before opening it, preparing myself for either outcome. Dear Ms. Ramirez, it began formally, I am pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the Navy Nurse Commissioning Program. Congratulations on this achievement. Your service record, academic performance, and clinical evaluations impressed the selection board. We believe you will be an outstanding addition to the Navy Nurse Corps. Relief and pride washed over me in equal measure. This wasn't just acceptance into a program. It was validation of everything I had fought for over the past year. My decision to protect my future, to stand firm in my boundaries, to rebuild from the ashes of family expectations. I texted Chen. Immediately. I'm in. Her response was instantaneous. Never doubted it for a second. Celebration tonight. No excuses. I smiled, closing the email to return to my study materials. There would be time for celebration, but first, I had exams to prepare for. The discipline that had carried me through military service and nursing school still guided my priorities. Later that evening, surrounded by friends at O'Malley's, Chen, fellow nursing students, colleagues from the VA, I allowed myself to fully absorb the reality of my accomplishment. In less than a year, I had gone from emptying my college fund to save my parents' house to securing a future that exceeded my original plans. To future Ensign Ramirez, Chen toasted, raising her glass. The Navy doesn't know what they're in for. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with the program acceptance itself and everything to do with the journey that had brought me here. From the desperate night I had transferred my savings to my parents, to the painful rejection when I refused to give more, to the slow, deliberate rebuilding of a life on my own terms. I had learned that family isn't just blood, it's the people who respect your boundaries, who see your worth beyond what you can provide for them, who stand beside you in both crisis and celebration. Looking around the table at the friends who had become family through choice rather than obligation, I knew I had found something more valuable than any college fund could buy, a sense of my own worth that no one could take from me again. The next day, I called my mother to share the news. Her genuine congratulations, unmarred by questions about how my decision would affect her, confirmed how far we had come. "Your father wants to know if we could take you to dinner sometime," she said tentatively. "To celebrate. Only if you're comfortable with that, of course." I considered the request carefully. There was still hurt there, still trust to be rebuilt. But there was also progress, genuine effort to understand and respect my boundaries, to see me as a person rather than a resource. "Maybe," I said. "Let me get through finals first and I'll let you know." "Of course," she agreed immediately. "Your studies come first. We're proud of you, Jessica, really proud. Not because of what you can do for us, but because of who you are." The words I had waited so long to hear, validation of my worth separate from my usefulness, settled deeply into places that had been aching for years. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." As spring turned to summer, I completed my first year of nursing school with honors. My position at the VA hospital continued, with responsibilities increasing as my skills developed. My application, paperwork for the Navy program progressed, with an official start date set for the following winter. And slowly, carefully, I began rebuilding a different kind of relationship with my parents, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation, on boundaries rather than expectations, on healing rather than harm. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still occasional slips into old patterns that required firm correction. The money they had taken remained gone, a fact we all acknowledged. But alongside that acknowledgement grew a tentative new understanding that, while the past couldn't be undone, the future could be approached differently. One evening in late June, I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset, Chen's planner open on my lap as I organized my summer schedule. The pages were filled with purposeful activity, shifts at the hospital, summer courses, Navy program paperwork deadlines, even a weekend visit to Aunt Sarah planned for July. On the inside cover, I had added a second quote beneath the first, something Dr. Winters had said during our final class of the semester: "Your greatest strength isn't what you can endure, but what you refuse to accept." For too long, I had accepted the role of family financial savior, had endured being valued only for what I could provide. My refusal to continue accepting that role had been painted as selfishness, as abandonment, as betrayal. But I knew now it had been none of those things. It had been self-preservation, self-respect, the necessary and painful recognition that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to stop enabling destructive patterns. My family still had work to do. I still had healing to complete. But the path forward was clearer now, illuminated by hard-won wisdom and the steady light of self-worth that could no longer be extinguished by anyone's disapproval or rejection. As darkness fell, I closed the planner and went inside, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The journey hadn't been easy, and the road ahead would have its own challenges, but I was walking it on my own terms now, each step a reaffirmation of a simple, powerful truth. I was worth fighting for. I always had been, and that knowledge, more than any academic achievement or career advancement, was the victory I would carry forward into the future I had saved for myself. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to my story. If you found it meaningful or think it could help someone else dealing with similar family pressures, please consider subscribing to my channel. I share these real-life stories because I believe in the power of knowing we're not alone in our struggles. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love most, and I want this channel to be a supportive community for anyone navigating those difficult waters. Hit that subscribe button to join our growing family, one that respects boundaries and celebrates personal growth. And don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thanks again for being here. I'll be back next week with another story that I hope will inspire and empower you. Until then, remember your worth isn't determined by what you give up, but by what you choose to build.